Hello everyone. So today in this video we're going to study the puzzle climb down the building. Now, this puzzle also captures one of the core concepts of how do we solve a logical puzzle, and we're going to study this exactly in this video. Okay, so let's quickly look at the question. The question is that a person is standing on top of a 200-meter tall building with a 150-meter long rope strong enough to carry his weight and a knife which he can use to cut the rope. Now here a person is standing on a 200-meter tall building, right? Had it been that the length of the rope is 200 meter, the question would have become quite easy. The person could have used simply that rope to climb down. But because we have a limited constraint of 150-meter long rope only, we'll have to think logically on how do we use this rope, how do we cut it, exactly at what lengths do we cut it in order to be using that rope to climb down the building. Now there are two hooks on the building. One is at the top which is 200 meter from the ground, and one at the middle which is 100 meter from the ground. Now one hook which is at the top of the building's height is 200 meter. So and one we have at the middle of the building. Now the top hook is obviously going to be used because we need to tie the rope somewhere before we pull down, before we climb down the rope. And this one additional hook which is at the exact center of the building, this can come handy to us when we try to solve our problem, right? So these are the constraints that we have. And what strategy should that person use to climb down the building using that rope, knife, and those two hooks? Okay, now we need to consider that there is no any other exit possible, like the person cannot just use the stairs or the lift and all those things. We need to think logically to use these resources that are given in the question, and we need to see how we can solve it. You can just pause the video here, try to think logically, see what all areas that you can cover in order to find a possible solution to this problem. How do you approach this problem is very crucial for this. We're going to talk about what the approach should be in this case, but one should be able to use some kind of logical reasoning to solve the question first before we go into the answer or this solution part of it. I just pause the video and think for a while. Okay, now that you have taken some time to think upon it, let's see how do we solve such kind of problems. So one of the common techniques to solve a logical puzzle is to work backwards. We try to solve the problem from the last step and work backwards to the very start. So if we apply this, we would like to imagine how the person would reach the ground from the closest hook to the ground, right? How much minimum road would be needed for that. So the closest hook from the ground is 100 meter from the bottom, which is at the middle of the building. From there, if the person needs to climb down the rope, what would be the minimum length of the rope that he would need? So if you see, a person can just simply tie one end of the rope on the hook at the middle and drop the rest of the rope at the bottom, climb down it. So the hook is, because the hook is at 100 meter from ground, the person would need at least 100 meter of length of rope to climb down that from that hook to the ground, right? So if we see this, if we try to solve for this, we can see that from here we can see that we just need 100 meter length of rope from the second hook. There is an additional 50 we might not use here at this moment of time. So this gives me some kind of a hint that I can divide my rope into two parts, maybe a 100 meter and a 50 meter. I can use the 100 meter rope to tie it to the middle hook and climb down to the ground. So if I have this information with me, how can I solve the rest of the problem? Now the next step would be to create a new sub problem, right? So now we consider that we need a 100 meter rope at the middle of the building, right? So the next question for us would become, how can we reach the middle hook with a 100 meter rope which we can use further, and we could have possibly used a 50 meter rope to climb down towards that hook. It may or may not be used later, but somehow we can formulate our answers around those conditions, right? So as we work backwards, we try to create a new sub problem to solve for, like we just did. So a person would need a minimum of 100-meter rope to climb down from the middle hook, like we discussed. This means we have to cut the rope in at least two parts, 100 and 50, again like we discussed. Another sub problem is how to reach the middle hook with these two ropes with 100-meter rope available for use. Okay, now let's see how do we use the resources that we have. Okay, now the person would know that he can use a 50-meter rope as it is, which he won't require any further. Once that person reaches the middle hook, he would not require the 50-meter rope. So we can somehow say that he can dispose of the 50-meter rope as it is. So imagine if the person ties one end of the 50-meter rope hole to the topmost hook, just throws the rope down the building and climbs down till that 50-meter length, right? He can just leave that rope as it is. He does not need to climb up again 50 meters to untie the hook and then come back, right? That would not make sense. So we can somehow get this information that I can tie one end of the 50-meter rope to the top of the building and can drop it, and then can use it to somehow reach the middle of the hook, right? Now what we are left with, if we tie one end of the rope from the top and we just throw it to the bottom, we know that we can climb 50-meter. But what happens after then? We have still 50-meter to go. Now again, if we see that the person has a 100-meter rope in his hands that he can still use, and if we also see 50 is just half of the 100, so if this can also give me an impression that if I fold my rope in two parts, if I just fold my rope one end to other, join both the ends together, it would form like a loop, and that loop would be of length 50-meter, right? So now how do I use this loop to climb down, and how do I retrieve that loop from the above 50-meter rope is what we need to solve for. So if you can see in this solution, what we could have done, you just create a small loop at the end of the 50-meter rope, tie one end to the top of the building, right? And we pass the 100-meter rope in between that loop, fold it in two parts and hold both the edges together. Now when we do this, you see that the total length from the top hook to the bottom would become 100 meters, right? And the person can use this to climb down from the top hook to the middle hook. Now once he reaches the middle hook, he can just simply leave one end of the rope and can just pull all the rope from that loop, and once he does that, he would still be at the middle hook and he would have the 100-meter rope in his hands, which he can use to tie one end from the middle hook and then can drop it down and can climb down the building to the bottom of the ground. I hope that makes sense. And if you see how did we proceed with the problem, we tried to work backwards. We tried to find how much the minimum rope would be needed to reach the bottom from the closest hook. How did we find that what all things do I need at the middle hook, how can I reach that, what all resources do I have at that point, and how can I use them to form the solution of that sub problem. And this is how we work backwards to solve a logical puzzle. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I hope this was of some use today, and please do post your comments if you need some more clarification around this, or if you have some doubts. Do share and subscribe for more such videos. Thank you.